this message may be for you. And if you've been following me for a while, you get it. If ain't nobody feeling you, you have to feel you. If ain't nobody feeling you, you have to feel you. Can't nobody tell me shit about me that I don't already know. That means you can't offend me. I'm responsible for offense, right? If I'm offended, I'm responsible for that. That means I took it. I picked it up and took offense. I took offense. I'm offended. Well, I'm going to blow the wind out of your sails, pirate ship. I now accept every single flaw that I have. Not only do I accept it, I'm going to go past acceptance and I'm going to love it. I'm going to rub my hands around up those stretch marks. Because if you are adept with your senses, you would know that if you rub your hands up them stretch marks, that those are braille instructions on telling you how to touch a bitch, rub a bitch, love a bitch, feed a bitch, starve a bitch, what a bitch is going through. If you're adept, those stretch marks may tell you a story of motherhood. After 2 miscarriages, third time no epidural, I had it. Those stretch marks tell a story. So the world told you to hate it. I love this part in the adaptation of by Oprah called Beloved. Now, I'm not going to talk about the scene where Paul D enters the house and sees the red light, because I think that was a poorly done cinematic tragedy. Big O had money to change that red light. It was just a light bulb that they flashed on and off. Don't do that. Hey, sis. But one of my favorite characters in Beloved is Baby Suggs, Setha's mother-in-law. Because there's this scene where Baby Suggs, the grandmother, the matriarch, the preacher, the prophet, the healer, she's having a sermon on a rock in the woods in Cincinnati, Ohio. These folks have escaped slavery, or they paid for their freedom, but they couldn't express joy. That expressing joy was sinful. How dare you smile, onyx skin colored? How dare you with your maple colored skin and your cheekbones that are full and how dare you smile? You should be under our feet. Don't express joy. That's a sin. So they go into the woods for a sermon. And in this scene, the men are told to weep, and they weep, and the women are laughing. And she says, they told you to hate your flesh after she beckoned the children to come. They told you to hate your flesh. And it was not in a divine love of God, a divine sacrifice of flesh. It was because they hated yours and they hated theirs. So when I tell you, I want you to embrace your flaws, embrace the temple. If ain't nobody feeling you, I will feel me, because you told me to hate my flesh because you hate yours. But if I learn to love my flesh, I will love yours too. if I learn to love the spirit that is me, the essence of creation that is me, the uniqueness that is me, the individuality that is me, I am loving God. Because understand something, there are many gods that have similar stories, similar powers, but there's only one of you. That your entire existence is the embodiment, the holy marriage of masculine, feminine, heaven and earth, fire, water, neutrinos. So if ain't nobody else feeling you, then you have to feel you. Because whether this is divine creation or not, this is an anomaly. I think the number and before I don't want to mess it up. So let me get the number, because there's a number of a probability of our entire universe, known and unknown, even existing. And the number is so large that if we wrote it out, the ink for this number would fill the known and unknown universe. And we use just one pen. That the mass, the volume of the probability of our entire universe existing mathematically, and then living in a habitable zone with a star that's big enough, and then having a Jupiter here, a Saturn here, a Neptune here, a Mercury here, a Venus that's witnessing, a moon, a 23.5 degree axis. And that's just to get to a planet. That's just to get to our planet. We're not talking about Andromeda galaxies or star systems or millions of years. I'm talking about the rise of consciousness that came from a zygote. And you have the nerve to look at me and tell me that you're nothing? That would be disrespectful to whatever God you do or do not worship. That's an insult to the mathematical probability. So when I tell you that if ain't nobody else feeling you, then you have to feel you. If no one's going to love you, what else are you supposed to do? What other option do you have? You tried it the other way. You tried it the other way. You tried it the other way. And if it hasn't worked, I tell you this from a place of contemplation, study, community. The season that we're entering into, the season that we are leaving, and the season that we are entering into, I'll tell you how to heal. And you can hear, you can write it down. But honey, everything starts with a decision. With a decision. I love you too. With a decision. If I know that pain is inevitable and suffering is a choice, this whole entire process, in my belief, is leaving the loop. This cycle is going to go on with or without us. You're asking me what came before this? A loop. It's never stopped. So you're asking me what came before this? The same thing that's at the end of it. It's never stopped. It's a loop. Whether this all is consumed in black holes, Whether the age, we're living in the era of light, of star systems, whether all of those stars collapse into white dwarfs, into black dwarfs, into rogue planets turning into dust consumed by black holes being crushed into a singularity. The same spark that started this whole cycle will start it all over again. And what we're supposed to do is master the loop, to leave it. Leave it. And if you're asking me how to leave the loop, I'm telling you, heal. Love yourself. Love yourself. Love other people. Take care of yourself and take care of other people, because that means taking care of everything around you. As above, so below. That I don't give a damn if you're an alchemist. I don't care if you're into chaos magic. I don't care if you're Sunni, Shiite, atheist, agnostic. You want to leave the loop? It is unconditional love. And we're walking around watching folks who do not love themselves, because you can tell by how they treat other people. That is the law. That is the spiritual law. It literally is do unto others. And when this is played back, someone's not going to like this. And I know I'm going to get a comment about it somewhere. I'm going to get a comment about this statement I'm about to say. There is no such thing, okay? There's no such thing. My heart is racing. Moral absolutism does not exist in the context of good and bad. It exists in the context of imbalance. I'm going to repeat it because it's going to sound like moral absolutism does not exist in the context of good and bad. It exists in the context of imbalance. I'm going to give you an example, particularly with power dynamics. When I give you this example, I don't want you to say, okay? I learned this expression, a pound of flesh for a pound of feathers. And when I give you this idea for why it is immoral to do this, you're going to get it because of a power dynamic. Abusing power is immoral because it's an imbalance of action. Donald Trump, for example, SXing abusing E. Jean Carroll was an abuse of power. That is immoral. It's unjust because the scales weren't even. They don't make the same amount of money. They're not in the same kind of realm, the status of you can't. And Donald Trump said this, and of course, you know, it's going to bring up Donald Trump. I had to bring up some kind of politician. Remember when Donald Trump in his first presidency was marred in the scandal with grab him by the you know, I don't want to get flagged for guidelines because you know they're watching when I bring up politicians. Grab him by the P word, and he had told that guy in that trailer that you can do whatever you want when you have money. That you can do whatever you want when you have money. When you're rich, you can do whatever you want, he says. You can do whatever you want when you have money. The wealthy have a responsibility. And if they use their wealth to increase their wealth and power, that is not only a social inequity, that is immoral. Because you're using your influence and your power to dominate and control and not level. You understand what I'm saying? Because here's what causes the binary of good and evil is intentionality. Is that we have the knowledge of intention because we are behind intention. That is what makes an action good or evil. So when I repeat this statement again, follow me. Moral absolutism, okay? Moral absolutism in the realm of good and evil does not exist in the outside of the context of imbalance. If it's imbalanced, it's immoral. If it's out of order, do you understand what I'm saying? Because we're watching an imbalance. We're watching Mammon being turned on his head. Because we're watching the wealthy fall. We're literally watching the collapse. We're watching we're watching it. Good and evil only exist in the realm of intention. This is the same way in the court of law. If you cannot prove intent, then you can't prove a crime. You have to prove intent. And because mankind knows intent, if you intend to do harm to a group of people, that is an imbalance. That is immoral. Genocide in any way will never be justified. And maybe when you look back over the Old Testament, what mankind was supposed to do was defy, because they knew intention, and they did not know the intention of the God that ordained a slaughter. And when you blindly follow and it violates the balance of humanity, the oppression and subjugation of a group of people when you were told to love them, because subjugation of a group of people when you were told to love them, because love will always balance the scale. You'll never love someone with malicious intent. So when I tell you that if you tell me that you love me, you would never harm me with malicious intent. If you say that you love yourself, you would never harm yourself with malicious intent. And because you know what it feels like to suffer without intent, to inflict suffering on another group of people or to another person to benefit you, that is an imbalance. That action is immoral. That makes it evil. And I stand 10 toes down on what I just said to you. It's not as nuanced as you think, because you know intent. If a God appeared before me and told me to go next door and harm my neighbor, to hell I will go. That was the test. That was the test. I was told to harm my neighbor. No God would ever demand of you to do that. And if they did, you must question what manifestation of your group called that spirit, called that energy, brought that kind of neutrino stirring, caused that kind of quantum combustion to do that. Because that is not the nature of mankind. the nature of mankind, they did not come into sin. They're not born flawed. They're not born flawed. And for Christians challenging this, that are going to come in here and say, well, I don't care about your scripture because I didn't ask you, because you must not have read it. The introduction of the character of Jesus to Abrahamic religion. Now, here's what's going to make somebody mad. The introduction of Jesus to the story, the introduction of God in the flesh. Now, put it together. You mean to tell me that Jesus the Christ was God in the flesh? That means that he loved the world, that he gave his only begotten son to himself. So he would sacrifice himself to you lot to then come back. He removed himself as the savior. That means you're responsible for what you do, because you're looking to the clouds to justify your behavior of being phobic, because you have not tried the Spirit, by the Spirit, to question what you've been taught. With anyone, if you deconstruct it and pull it back, he was removing himself from the story. I've given everything you need now. This is you. This is all you. You have it. We're blaming the devil. No, it's not. That poor Lucifer, Satan's been catching L's from Christians for years, millennium. Why are we blaming the actions of a patriarchal government, of perverse politicians, institutions built on perversion, subjugation, colonization, the oppression of women, the suppression of free thought, anti-intellectual? Why in the world wouldn't you blame them? Because the corruption has not stopped in the church house. But you're starving. The preacher's the biggest one, the fattest one in the congregation, and you're living in prayer and supplication when you have not worked out your own soul salvation. So if you're going to bring that conversation in here, the Savior's already left and has returned multiple times in your face. Because whether the character or whether the person was Jesus or not, you've met the character. I told you this forever. Whether the gods existed, whether the prophets existed, whether the angels existed or not, the objective energy for that scenario played out because it hit the minds of men. So that must mean that objective energy was what coalesced to form those images on a cosmic quantum level that came out and was expressed as Mayet, that was expressed as Zeus, that was canonified as God the Father. I'm telling you something. That means you've met this character multiple times. You've seen Jesus. You saw Jesus in the first little boy in Palestine. When you saw his beady eyes for the first time, full of tears, crying for his mother. On October the 8th, you saw him. You saw Mary in the face of Sonia Massey, whether she's had children or not. You've seen the Buddha multiple times, and folks on this application, you've seen them over and over and over again, because those are cycles. We're going to give them to you every single cycle till you get it, so you can leave the loop. What do you mean leave the loop, Indigo? What do you mean, Zoe? I mean leave the loop. We're never going to do this again with you. You leave the loop. We're on a cycle, babe. The cycle of creation is a seesaw going back and forth, throwing these things back and forth. It's existed before you, exists after you, exists with you, exists in you. It is you. That's the secret they've been trying to hide from you. It's you. The point of reference for existence, destruction, heaven, and hell is you. Why? Because you can't tell me any otherwise. Heaven only exists in your five senses, and hell exists just the same. And what you choose to do with those things, they were going to tear the veil, that the veil was torn. I don't care how you get there, because love is the ultimate answer. And if your religion, your philosophy does not lead you with love, repeat the loop and do it again. Your only mission in this life is to heal your wound. I thought about this because we just read the descent of Inanna the other day, right? And I thought, I've been meditating on this for days. And it hit me today in prayer. Hit me today. What if this is the underworld? What if we are in here? What if this was the realm that we were supposed to master? Because remember something, when Inanna descended and got to her sister Ereshkigal, she had no relics of power. She had no maze on her. She was naked with no power. But what brought Inanna back was love and compassion. That's what healed the wound in her sister, and that's what brought Inanna back. I want to repeat it one more time. I said it was the love and compassion that those two beings had on Ereshkigal that brought her back. What if this was the realm that we were supposed to master? Healing those wounds of rejection and shame, denial, guilt with love. Learning what it felt like that in this form to be burned by touching a hot iron. That we're supposed to warm people because we know what it feels like to be burned now because we're clothed with skin. Because we lived once in a quantum state that were just numbers. That we lived once upon a time in water and mountains, but we could not smell each other. This whole entire creation was for love. This whole entire covalent bonds, all of these things binding to get to this moment. Scientists are still trying to prove consciousness. Where did the rise of consciousness come from? We know where brains come from and the development of all of, but we cannot figure out where the rise of consciousness came from. That's your miracle. To be both conscious and conscientious at the same time enables you to be literally trapped, bound into a sacred rage. So use that rage that's rooted in love to heal in spite of, to love despite of. It's not a popular movement, I know. But it's gotten us this far, hasn't it? The movement ain't die. We're entering a time of the rise of spirituality. I want you to know that. The rise of technology, the rise of spirituality, of advancements in science, communication, and global cooperation, a global communion. A global communion. A global resistance. An evening of the scales. The exaltation of the poor, the tired, and the huddled masses. The spark, the fire. This is the time, my dear. What other choice do you have? Because now we're understanding, we're alike, you and I. Not all skin folk are kinfolk, and not all kinfolk are skinfolk. We share the same air, though, the same five senses. We have the same selenium, iron in our bodies. You need the same hemoglobin and myoglobin to carry the memories of muscle growth and movement that will be stored into this limb and this muscle. We are doing the same thing, you and I. Who knew that I would find so much divinity in humanity? Maybe that Jesus was on to something. Love your neighbor like you love yourself. What is the greatest commandment? Love yourself. Love God with your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole heart, your whole strength, all that stuff. That's loving that's loving what's around you, by the way. Don't even know you're loving God. You don't even know that how you treat other people, you have no idea that you're even following a commandment. You have no idea you're following the greatest commandment. That surpasses all religions, that surpasses all kind of spirituality. Do unto others. I said do unto others. That was the law that was written upon, thank you, that the law would be written upon their heart. And I will dwell with them and be their people. And what's that law? Do unto others. You have no idea that you're in alignment by doing unto others what you'd have do unto you. Ain't that something? Who knew you were spiritual? You left the church for 17 years, had no idea that you were doing unto others. Who knew that's what Buddha was talking about? Who knew that was the lesson that we had to teach them? The gods that came before us. Who knew? Who knew? That was the lesson that we were supposed to learn. That when Zeus would take all of those mortal women, that had Zeus practice self-control, had he been faithful to his wife. Doesn't that sound familiar to you? Who knew that when Ganesha's head was removed by Shiva, that had his father been patient, who knew? We do. You and I do. Because we've suffered from impatience. We have been impatient. And now we embody patience. Now we have moved from duality, from being separate, to duality, the bridge, and then mastering duality, the marriage. Who knew that black and white could make rainbows? Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Moving from duality to mastery, the marriage of all of our life experiences, the culmination of letting go, going with the flow, acceptance, moving. Because no matter what happens, my mother would always say, nobody has a heaven or a hell to put you in. Now, what happens when you accept your heaven or you accept your hell? You're wondering why some of these billionaires are billionaires and they're such awful people? Because they probably accepted that they're going to burn. That's why they're clinging to their life. That's why you were taught that the love of money is the root of all evil. That's why they're trying to extend their life, keep their youth. And you're living in heaven in a 1-bedroom apartment, decorated pink. You're living in heaven in that 1-bedroom apartment too, satisfied. No furniture payments, everything paid off. That Nissan Altima paid off. You don't owe nobody. You have no kids. On the couch watching Law and Order SVU. What did Joanne the scammer say? My doors lock at 10 o'clock. It's damn near 12. Living in heaven where you are. What if that was the test for you? What if that was the lesson? You finished. You finished. Who knew that loving yourself was the way? Who knew that forgiving yourself was the way? Who knew that greater works you were going to do? Billions of years for this culmination for you to get here. And you don't know what's coming after this life because no one's come back to tell you. But I can tell you one thing for sure. And two things for certain. Love of self, the love of others, and the protection of what's around you do whatever you have to heal. Say sorry and be sorry. In everything that you've ever wanted to do, go for it, because the worst thing they can tell you is no. And if that's the worst thing, you've been called worse. Yep, and take accountability for your actions. Be accountable. You'd be so surprised. You'd be so surprised how many, myself included, and I don't know about your journey, this is my journey. You'd be so surprised how many of us just want accountability. I don't need you to do anything. I don't need your money. I don't even need your apology. What I need you to do is be accountable for what you've done. I need you to validate this so I can go on. Now, I've never gotten that. And here's what I had to do. This is just me. Do not seek closure with other people. Because there may be in many cases that you do not get that. You're not going to get it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're not going to be on Karamo Brown. And Yama's not going to fix your life. They're not coming. And I had to learn to accept an apology from folks that I was never going to get one from. But here's something else. I also had to learn. And it's not a one size fits all, because healing is subjective. You have the objective to complete it, but healing is subjective. You don't have to heal. You hear? I also had to pull apart their actions. And I had to figure out exactly why they did those things to me. Because sometimes a rolling stone tumbles downhill, a boulder will roll downhill until impeded by something else. Until it's impeded by something. Certain folks don't know that what they've done to you is wrong or that it hurt you. And here's where I pull this apart. I never blame folks who hurt me but did not know they hurt me, because they themselves were taught to do those actions. You were taught to be that way. And you've known nothing different. Your father does this. Your uncle does this. Everyone does this. You were conditioned to do this. But once I tell you that your actions have harmed me or harmed somebody else and you continue to do those things, now we have an imbalance because you've removed consent from somebody. And you don't have the right to inflict pain on any living thing without its consent. When you remove consent and you inflict pain on someone, you don't have the right to tell them, no, I didn't, or no, it didn't hurt you, or this is good for you. You don't have the right to do that. So once those things are brought to your attention, and you do those things again, well, now you're out of balance. That's an immoral thing to me. Because those things are subject. That's between you and them. You understand what I'm saying to you? So I had to pull apart the actions of people. And I'm also quite flexible. Because I've hurt people too, knowingly and unknowingly. And who am I? Who am I to do that? So here's how I fixed my karmic wound. I accepted apologies from folks that I'll never see, and I released them. But I didn't release them with it wasn't like if I see you, I'm gonna dap you up. If I see you, I'm not gonna punch you in your mouth. Because sometimes loving you is not harming you. I want you to eat, just not at my table. If you're hungry, I may throw you a couple of dollars because I know what it feels like to suffer, but I don't want you to eat with me. What will be will come to you, but not with me. I don't have to forgive you with falling down at your knees. I can turn it into indifference. You thought that I was going to tell you to blindly forgive your abuser? Absolutely not. What I'm going to tell you to do is return it with indifference. You have to make your trauma pay you in dividends. Or why is it there? It happened when you were 3 years old. I'm aware. You're 44. Go back to that 3-year-old child and go get her. She has no idea that you've survived. You thought I was going to tell you to no. I said return indifference. You have to heal that wound, hon. The only one that lives with that is you. What you gonna do? You tried to drink it away. That didn't work. Smoked it away. Didn't work. You had kit. Didn't work. It didn't work. And it's because many of you are going right back to that inner child as the child you were then and not as the adult you are now. That little boy has no idea that you're married, that you did get a good job, that you did leave that house, that you, honey, where you are and where you should be are two different places. Now, what timeline do you want to live on? The only one that can tell your story is you. The writing of it is objective. Honey, now that's still being written. What you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you going to do? The objectivity here is the ink in the pen. The objectivity here of this story, of this writing, is the paper. The subjective is how you write it. The subjective is how you tell it. When you have to snatch that pen back from your trauma. I'm writing it and I'm the only one that can tell it. What you gonna do? No one knows your greatest shame and no one knows your greatest pain. But you and the one you did it to. So now what you gonna do? Either you heal or you do it again. I said this maybe last year, 2 years ago. I truly do believe that unhealed trauma turns into dementia. And maybe they're going to do a study on it. Unhealed, unresolved trauma will get back at you in your old age. I had a relative of mine who was in a convalescent home for many years toward the end of his life. And the nurse had asked a cousin, she said, has your grandfather been abused? And she said, excuse me? She said, I'm asking this because he had a bit of a panic attack while he was in a I don't know the wording, but he was far gone, and that he was screaming in that room to stop. She said, I could not tell that nurse that my mother abused my father. She said, I knew exactly what she was talking about. She said, I knew exactly what she was talking about. She said, I could not do that to my family. I could not tell that nurse that my mother abused my father for years and that he had PTSD from that. Let me tell you something. That's going to come back. That returns to a loop. That returns to a loop. When this plays back on Spotify, I'm going to echo it again. That unhealed trauma returns to the loop. Everything you heal undoes. It pulls out from a loop. That's what breaking generational curses breaks a loop. And you can learn this way, okay? And I want to use an example with my own. My mother used to, and I use story a lot. My mother, kid of the 90s, I'm 33. My mother used to iron our clothes every week. Every Sunday for the week. So in the morning, I gotta go. I don't want to hear anything about what's going on. Put your clothes on. I laid your clothes out. They're already ironed. Go. And I was about 3 or 4 years old, and I wanted to play with the iron. And my mother would smack my hands away. Now I'm 3 years old. I remember this, and if this happened a few times, a few weeks, she's smacking my hands. And I know that it was different weeks because we used to watch the Golden Girls. And there'd be different episodes every Sunday. So that's how I knew that over weeks, my mother was smacking my hand away. And she would say, you're going to burn yourself. And I know everything. Right, my little 3-year-old self, I know what I'm doing. My mother tried one time to show me. She reached for the iron and she grabbed it by the front. And she said, oh, ow. Oh, my hand hurts. Ow. And I'm looking at her like, she can't take a burden, but I can. I can. My mother left the room one day, and Golden Girls was off. She turned it to Alex Trebek, Jeopardy, and she's cooking dinner at the time. So she leaves the room, and she goes to the kitchen, and it's me, that iron, and Alex Trebek. And I said, today is the day. Today's the day. Today's the day. I'm doing it. My mother's out there, and I didn't see that she had unplugged the iron. I ain't see that she unplugged it. I looked out the door. I climbed on the bed. I reached for that iron, and I grabbed the front of that iron, and that motherfucker burned me. Oh my God. That, and I lose it. I am screaming my head off. My mother was standing at the doorway. I didn't even notice her. And she screams. She's like, I told you. And she's kissing my boo-boo. You just weren't going to learn. You weren't going to learn until you burn yourself. Now, here's how I tie this back. Here's how I tie this back. You may not have learned your lesson when you were a queen in 1732 in Wakanda. You may not have learned it as a cow, as a California dairy cow in Berkeley, California. You may not have learned the story as an eagle. You may not have learned the lesson as your grandmother. You may not have learned it as your uncle. You may not have learned the lesson as your father, but who you're going to learn it as is as a child. You may not have understood the lesson at the first gate when you entered into the underworld. You may not have learned it at the third gate. You didn't learn it at the second. Go back. You didn't learn it at the fourth gate. You didn't learn it at the... Now you're here. My dear Inanna, in compassion from these two spirits here, these genderless spirits here, the compassion they had for me brought you back. Who knew that love and compassion could heal a boo-boo? Because a little 3-year-old me was told this is going to burn you. You didn't learn when you heard it. You didn't learn when you smelled it. You didn't learn the lesson when you tasted it. You didn't learn the lesson but I'm going to give you all of these senses. Boom! I'm going to give them all to you. And you're going to do this again. I'm going to give you a sixth sense. What is that? I'm going to give you intention. What do you mean intention? The only one that knows the intention of your actions is you. That means you have to learn grace and mercy now. Because you're going to make those mistakes too. There are some folks that have to be burned. There are some folks that have to watch somebody get burned. There are some folks, but the lesson will be taught one way or another. What if this life, what if this revelation, what if this one is you breaking the loop? Is you leaving the loop? What if this was the form of God? What if you are the fallen angel that had to learn the lesson? What if you are indeed the risen Christ? What if you are the Buddha? What if it really is true? Every story you read of the chosen ones are teaching you something because it's you. You know why? Because you begat you. What's at the end, Indigo? What's at the beginning, Zora? The same thing that was always there. You. You. One way or another, you. I don't know what you want from me. You. What do you remember from before? That's exactly what will be there at the end. Now here's the difference. Will you be in it? Or will you be building it? Now let's do it again. Now this time, when you come back and do it, will you be experiencing it? Will you be stopping it? Or will you be causing it? So the obligation that you do is, if you're never going to get that apology from the one that hurt you, apologize to the ones whom you've hurt. That means to yourself too. That's where it starts. Luke, you can look at this as God rectifying Adam and Eve, since now he knows the full story. Why? Because you know. Because now you know intent. Have a good night. Sleep tight. How about that? Sleep well tonight on that. Sleep on that. And I'll go toe to toe with any kind of religious imam, priest. I don't give a good goddamn. That's it. I don't know what you want. What's my destiny, Indigo? What do you want it to be? What's the purpose of life? What do you want it to be? Because there are some folks that need to be billionaires to get to heaven. And there are some folks that all they want to do is wear their hair the way they want to, express themselves the way they want to, in a one-bedroom apartment in all pink with a paid-off Nissan Altima on my couch with my door locked at 10 p.m. watching Law & Order SUV. What's heaven? I don't owe nobody nothing. Because it don't matter if you're rich or not. If you owe somebody, are you really rich? I don't owe nobody. I don't owe nobody an apology. I don't owe nobody a sorry. I don't owe nobody. That quickened me. I don't owe nobody. I can let it go because it'll come back. Because it's just a season. I've lost nothing. I will lose nothing. I will lose nothing. I've accepted heaven and hell and death as an inevitability because it's just a gate. And I'm not afraid to go. as long as I can go, watching my Law and Order SUV and my one-bedroom apartment all decorated with my paid-off Nissan Altima, no student loans. I'm secure in self. I'm secure in other people. Right, I'm talking about peace. That's it. Congratulations, you've left the loop.